Welcome, everybody. You're watching Pastor Talk. My name's Ethan, and today we are joined by Pastor Keith Castleberry.
Again.
And we've got an interesting topic to discuss. Before we do, I want you to let me know in the comments section how the audio is. We are obviously in a new studio. We have been occupying the youth room upstairs, and it was tough because we had to set up and take down every week, basically. So hopefully this will be a more permanent situation. So let us know how the audio is going. We're going to make some changes as we go tonight. And tonight we're going to talk about risk. So the question I'm going to open up with, or maybe I'm asking you to describe something. Describe a world without risk. Describe a world without risk. And we're going to talk about that just for a few minutes, and then we're going to get into that and how we can overcome risk, because it's something that we have to overcome in our life. We have to. So, Pastor, why don't you describe a world. And this could be a family without risk. This could be a job without risk, a church community that doesn't take risk, or a nation. So, Pastor, why don't you lead us into that? We can talk for just a few minutes while everybody else leaves some comments.
It won't take me long. I would say one word for all of it: dead. Whether it be a family or a person or a church or whatever, even the world, whatever it is. Without risk, you have nothing. I mean, I took a risk. Now, I took a risk coming here tonight, driving. And I didn't even drive. Well, I did drive the first time, but we was in two vehicles. But yeah, without risk, you're no progress. And literally, you're dead. You're just dead. That's all there is to it. And there's no way to get around it. I think, in fact, I would say we had a young lady this week that was in an auto accident, and she didn't realize, her and her mom, they didn't realize that they were taking a risk getting on the road because they had gotten so used to the risk. So we have to have a risk tolerance, and without a risk tolerance, we do nothing. That's just the way it is. So
I agree completely. You have to figure these things out and think about it, because so often risks become barriers. So if you allow these things to take over,
they're so big you can't go through them. So
right. So anyways, why don't you guys, we're talking about a world without risk. Why don't you let us know in the comments section, because you're all commenting here. Let us know what a world without risk. And I know we've had someone say heaven. That's a cop-out.
That's a cop-out, but it is.
but what is a world here on earth look like without risk? If you were a person, because I know that many of you are risk takers, you have allowed these things to be stepping stones in your life. You take these risks and you move forward. They're not stumbling blocks. So what is a world without risk? And I've got the settings on this set very low because our internet is not where it's supposed to be. So I apologize if the stream is messed up. Please let us know as we go, and we'll do our best tonight.
For that.
Go ahead.
Suggestion. If anyone despises our internet connection so much, you could give us about $7,000 or $8,000, and we'll get what is it called? The cable, not the cable, but the
fiber.
Fiber. We'll get. I think of cereal when I talk about fiber, but anyway, we'll get the fiber optics out here, and it'll be a lot better. We're kind of on the edge of the country, and we don't have the high-speed internet out here as much as we want. But anyway, hopefully it's good enough.
Right. So I've got a few things. So a couple quotes that came to mind today, because we're in a time, and obviously the setting we're in.
Yeah.
We're in a setting where COVID is a real thing, and we're having to deal with juggling the risks, multiple risks, not just COVID. The risk of losing ability to be social with one another, disconnection with each other,
mental disease, mental health issues,
and things like that. So
physical issues,
right.
Not moving, not going anywhere, things like that. Yeah, what we used to do, we don't do as much.
Right, some things have changed, and so the risk of COVID may not be as great as some other risks that are byproducts of our response to COVID.
Right,
and so we have to be careful with that, and that's something that I believe we have been talking about over the past few months is what risks are we willing to take?
Yeah,
not that all right, let's evade risk completely. Right. But let's measure it, look at it, and have a balanced view of risk.
Well, I'm having to deal with this as a pastor. As a pastor, we obviously first when COVID came out, the predictions was horrible, and so we submitted ourselves to the doctors and the scientists, and we said, okay, we'll lock down, and it was hard. What was it? Middle of June, we come back, or maybe the end of June, we come back, and we went to 2 services, and then they said, oh, it's coming back. We locked back down and went to 1 service. Well, recently I had to make the decision to let's go back to a Wednesday night Bible study, and because you said the risk, that what we call the secondary risk in psychology, the secondary risk of this, of locking down and only have 1 service, is there's that spiritual risk that we not remain who we're supposed to be spiritually, which is the greatest risk. Right. That's greater than a nuclear war, that we're not spiritually well and healthy. And if we don't get to the point to where we engage, not just on a church-wide level, but on a personal level, if we don't engage people in the church and in the things of God, they run the greatest risk, which is that spiritual risk.
Right.
So I had to take, recently I've had to make that call. Let me get back to what I was talking about. I've had to make that call. We're going to go back to a Wednesday night Bible study, and we're going to start making some progress. And I've had, not a lot, but I've had 1 or 2 people, maybe 2 or 3, if I'm not mistaken, said, oh, that's horrible. But the spiritual risk is greater than the health risk.
Right. So let's talk just for a minute. I'm going to kind of give us some quotes, and maybe you can tell me what you think about them. And these are quotes from people throughout history that they're very true. And so often we take quotes and we say, oh, yeah, that's great, but we don't put them into practice.
Yeah.
And so we have to be careful with that as well. Theodore Roosevelt said this: no man is worth his salt who is not ready at all times to risk his well-being, to risk his body, to risk his life in a great cause. What do you think about that? What does that make you think about whenever you hear that quote?
It makes it, that really, to me, when I think of that, I really believe that is the truth. First of all, let me just say that. That's the truth. I believe that we should be so passionate about something that we're willing to die for it.
Right.
There should be one thing, or more maybe. There should be at least one thing in our lives that we are so passionate about. And I'm not talking about a loved one, you or my wife or children. I'm talking about a cause. And I have chosen, of course, this is pastor talk, so we're talking about the church, but I personally chose my greatest mission, the one thing I'm willing to lose my life over, not counting my wife and children and grands and all that kind of stuff, is the cause of Christ.
Right.
But Scripture, Jesus said in Matthew 10 that you're going to be persecuted for my name's sake. You're going to be persecuted. And that he said that in some way, shape, or form multiple times. And that just tells you you're going to be persecuted. So therefore, you have to say, okay, is it worth the risk? Is it worth putting your life on the line? And that's really what it comes down to. You've got to find that place that you said, this is worth dying for. Of course, I think as just a what do they call it, alpha male, I'm also willing to die for our freedoms and our liberties that my grandkids and kids can enjoy. I don't want to be anything near socialism or Marxism or any of that, communism. I want to be free. And in order to do that, I'd fight for that. I'm willing to lay my life down for that too. So I think everybody should have at least one or more.
Right. And I would say the aversion of risk that people try to attain, they try to get away from risk. They're managing risk so much so that they just neglect it completely.
Yeah.
I feel as if social media has caused most people to fit into a mold, to that aversion to risk mold. Like, if I post this or if I stand for this, then will I be called this online? Or what will my family think, friends think? Mm-hmm. While I think that was obviously there 100 years ago, 200 years ago, throughout time, I'm curious as to the effect of social media on people's taking stands on certain issues, especially when facts can be
absolutely
changed, which is hard to believe. But facts are different to different people apparently in 2020. So I'm
we've seen waves, and that is very important. This is something we need to be very cognizant of. we've seen waves of causes, great causes, because of social media, because of the internet. They're very exposed and they catch fire, so to speak, and they run around the world. This cause, that cause. Recently, we had the Me Too movement. Now it's
Just like that.
yeah,
It's gone.
yeah, it's gone. We don't even hear
Crazy.
about it. But then there's the BLM movement, Black Lives Matter movement. It'll people get tired of that. It'll go away. But we just wave after wave after wave after wave, and we're becoming desensitized to that kind of stuff. But I also think that social media has allowed, I don't know what percentage, I don't even have a percentage. Let's just say 80%. 80% of viewers to live vicariously through somebody else that takes the danger. You take the danger and I'm going to watch you.
Right.
And I'm placated. My mental.
Well, most people would rather sit around and watch Netflix and watch
Exactly.
adventure movies rather than doing an adventure.
Right.
And that's what's crazy.
Yes.
They're so risk adverse that
It's crazy.
I love risk. It sure is nice.
Yeah.
There's a cartoon. I can't remember what it is, but the mindset was, it was the snowman. Oh, wouldn't summer be amazing?
Oh yeah.
Summer. Oh, it's great. Summer. Oh, wow. Just dream about summer. It's these people that sit at home all day and they just
Yeah.
watch adventures without actually going and doing them or challenging themselves.
Just doing something. It's,
Right.
and you know what's crazy is we live in a day, and this is just the way it is. Everything we do is a risk. We just don't we don't recognize it. What we eat is very risky. What we drink, where we go, look at our speed, the speed we travel. I mean, even 40 miles an hour is 3 or 4 times faster than what they traveled 150 years ago.
Right.
It's crazy.
I'm curious. You're talking about the risks that we have, what we eat, what we
Yeah.
drink, what we do. If we could put that next to COVID, which is a greater risk? Being
Yeah.
unhealthy prior to, because it seems like comorbidities are the thing.
It
now
is
for
a
COVID.
thing.
So, is it a greater risk for us being unhealthy, getting out, exercising, whether it be groups, whatever?
Yeah. I believe COVID is, oh man, I don't want to say hyped, but it was hyped because of the lack of knowledge. I'm not, implicating somebody in some scheme, but because of their lack of understanding, it was hyped up, and not intentionally, but put up there to where it was so dangerous. But the secondary risk of mental health issues, social issues, our children, our elders, there was I think 3 months or maybe more, 4 months that I didn't even want to go visit my dad, who is 77 years old, and I would love to spend more time with him. That's hard. And you know what? It's hard on him because he's at this age, and some of our audience might not understand it, but it's like going to prison. All you do is sit around and think of what you could do when you was outside, and you're like waiting on somebody to call you, waiting on somebody to come and see you. You just can't wait for some visitor to come to the prison. Well, in unfortunately, once you get to a certain age and a certain activity level, that also becomes, so that's a major secondary issue or risk that is really greater than COVID. I really believe that. And health risk, because we don't exercise or we don't, whatever it may be, whatever, I guess everybody's different. Some are made up their mind, I'm going to run anyway. That's fine, run. But not everybody has that freedom. Many millions of people live in apartment complexes or don't have anything like that to go. So it's quite complicated, but I believe that everybody here, everybody that listens to us, it doesn't matter whether you listen or not, everybody has a certain amount of risk. And there's global risk, pandemics. There, the doomsday clock it lists 2 major risks. I think they call it risk majeur. It's from French, of course, and that is nuclear and climate change. And that doomsday clock is always moving farther away or closer to midnight. Well, the beginning of this year, it was 100 seconds from midnight, which is doomsday. But there's national risk, there's local state risk. Like, for instance, earthquakes. They only happen in a couple of states. I mean, major earthquakes.
Right.
So we all take those risks, but we all have to realize on the other side of those risks is the reward.
Right. And that's what we're here tonight to talk about
Right.
is basically putting risk in its place rather than risk
Absolutely.
controlling the humanity. who
Taking
we are.
control of the risk.
Exactly. Taking control. And because we see in business, you see financial risk managers, you see
Absolutely.
all this risk management. Every industry in the world has risk management involved.
Yes.
If they could not make a profit if they didn't manage their risk.
That's right.
Understanding there's the risk and reward. And so something more applicable for us, because we're not going to talk about the market necessarily or finance or for a Fortune 500 company, but we could talk about the family.
Yeah.
And that's really what we're here for with Pastor Talks. We talk about things that are practical, things that are biblical. And so we're going to kind of lean it towards the family. I've got a couple more quotes that I just want to get out there just so that we can have it. And if you have anything that sparks your mind, please jump in. John Paul Jones says, it seems to be a law of nature, inflexible and inexorable, that those who will not risk cannot win.
That's true.
Those who will not risk, they won't win.
That's right.
And we have a lot of people in our world that choose to not risk. They get jobs that are as secure as possible, and if they even get a job.
Right.
So we see that happening all the time.
Well, they see the reward of not working greater than the reward of working, or the reward of being dependent greater than the reward of being dependable. Yeah. And that is an infection, really, because if we don't live that dependable nature, our children won't see it and they won't reflect it. That anyway, go ahead, keep going.
Well,
I'm sorry.
We were talking about a couple scriptures earlier before we started the show. I'm trying to think of the one that I brought up, and I didn't even write it down. But from a biblical view, we have the Great Commission.
Yeah.
We have Matthew 28:19. We have go ye therefore teach all nations. We have this commission to go and to teach,
right,
and to preach, and to spread the word of God, spread the gospel, his death,
right,
burial, and the resurrection. Is there risk involved?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, like I said, if you shall be persecuted for my name's sake.
Right.
That's. In fact, that is one of those scriptures that it's like Jesus' name, baptism, Jesus' name, everything, because that alone should tell you something.
For my name.
Yeah, for my name's sake. And then, of course, the Pharisees, don't preach no anymore in this name. So that's that. But yes, there's always risk involved. In fact, as I was looking at it a while back, the Beatitudes. There's 9 Beatitudes that Jesus quoted there in Matthew. And of the 9, 1/3 of them involve risk. You're going to be persecuted for this. You'll be looked down on for this. And living for God is literally it's a risk that we have to take. We have to be willing to take. But the thing that concerns me, and I don't want to get preacherly here, but the thing that concerns me is, are we really recognizing? Are we making ourselves think we're taking risk when we're not, and we're just playing church and we're playing religion?
Give me an example of that, if you don't mind.
Well, I think it's very easy to get into the habit of just going to church. That's not risky. That's acceptable. Everybody loves you for it.
It's a standard.
That's a standard that it's acceptable in our world, not only in the church, but even in the workplace. Oh, went to church yesterday. Yeah, cool, no problem. But I think it's, you step into the risk when you began to witness, or when you began to reach somebody, or you began to, one day, and this is just a few years ago, but I remember a lady, I was in, I think for some reason, I don't even know why, but I was in Target or Walmart or whatever, and she looked like kind of down, and I said, "Hey, are you okay?" And she said, "Oh, I've had this, that, and the other." I said, "Well, let me pray for you." And that was a huge risk. Yeah, she was like she just kind of was stunned.
Right.
And I think to be true Christians is not just to lay down our life in repentance and being born again, but to be true Christians is to lay down our life, pick up the cross. And the cross that we bear is literally, it's continuing the work of Jesus, which is to reconcile humanity to God. That was his job. That was his task. And so we have to bear that cross by taking that commission personally, and saying, I will be a risk taker when it comes to living for God. I will be a risk taker when it comes to reaching souls. I'll be a risk taker. I mean, for the church people, it's like praying for one another. It's crazy. I pastor, if you didn't know this, I pastor a Pentecostal church. We're not supposed to be scared of praying for people on the altar.
Right.
But I see, not every service, but everybody's like, ooh, there's somebody down there praying. Maybe somebody else will go pray. I'm like, man, come on.
Break off that shell.
Right.
Because we've been basically put into a shell, a cocoon of sorts.
Safety.
Of safety, exactly.
Yeah, if I don't go, I'm safe. If I don't pray, I'm safe. If I don't, whatever, I won't be looked at. There's no reward in that.
We're people of faith as well.
We're people of faith. Yeah.
Are we? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But there's no reward in that. The reward is in the risk. The reward, and that's in everything. It's marriage.
Right. Let's talk about
raising children.
The family structure.
Yeah.
You said marriage. Let's start with that. What risks do you think are there, or people assume that the risk is there initially before the family's ever started?
I think, okay, let's just go back, and I'll just use me as an example because I don't want to talk about anybody else. But I think, I know when you're younger, it's easier for you to take risk.
Right.
Older you get, the
more
risk,
resilient, you can bounce
your
back.
tolerance comes down, because when you get older, you think, well, first of all, I don't want to have to deal with rebuilding life or restarting everything. And then maybe it's fear, maybe it's just, financial or whatever. But when you're young, as a young man, I saw your mother and I'm like, it's worth the risk. And I just boldly went out there. So we're talking about pre-marriage. And I think that people need to learn, if you're going to have relationships, it's going to take risk.
Right.
Then to build from that relationship to marriage, it's a great risk. Will you marry me? And I see people, and this is an epidemic in our world as well. I'm going to get all my life organized and set up. I'm going to get my education behind me. I'm going to get my house. I'm going to get the car I want. And then I'm going to start
all my
dating.
Toys.
Yeah. Then I'm going to start dating somebody. And that's a risk you take based on the reward that you want. But what they fail to realize is it's hard to have babies after 40. Right. It's hard to, can you imagine having a baby at 40? You're going to be 60 before they graduate.
Well, yeah, and your physical ability to keep up with babies and your patience level is reduced quite a lot.
So you're trading off risk for reward at every level. And then if we go into children, you have a child, and then raising, how do you raise that child? And the problem with living for God, raising children, and there could probably be another thing or two, but I didn't think about it. The problem that we have in negotiating that risk and reward is the reward is so far off. The reward of raising a child, living for God, disciplined, organized, putting them in that arrow, so to speak, shooting them off, that the reward is so far off.
Especially in our modern society where we want immediate results.
That's right.
We have everything at the touch of our fingertips.
Yeah.
We've got our cell phones that are the supercomputer that
the
world never had 50 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
And so we are immune, or we're accepting of, I need everything now.
You think about it. Before the microwave, to cook a decent meal, there was a lot of work. Two hours,
Right.
And of course, that was excluding sandwiches, I guess. But really, we are so attuned with immediate results. That's why raising children, and I just picked two, and I'm sure there's probably a few more. Maybe starting a business is one. A business, I've started a few. Risky. Well worth it, but believe me, you're not going to make there's Amazon, there's what do they call it? The unicorns,
right.
That start making profits earlier, but you're not going to be profitable 3 to 5 years.
Right. And risk is relative as well. You look back and you say, wow, that wasn't really risky.
That wasn't hard at all. Compared, you're standing in the blessings and you're like, oh, that wasn't hard.
And if you're raised in a family where, say, your dad pushed you to do these things, we talked about the bubble. We talked about, say, the balloon.
The balloon.
Stretching. Let's bring that up. Let's
okay.
talk about that.
So there is, and I should have looked it up. I don't think I even wrote it down, but I will. I didn't write it down. But there is a psychological, I'm going to say syndrome. It's not really a syndrome. It's just a situation, if you will, where we have personally accepted a certain amount of tolerance. And I'm not talking about risk, but just expanding
Your
our
capacity to
capacity
hold
to
on
deal
risk or
with
deal with it.
things. Yeah. And just life. And so, but and I wished I could remember. Let me see if I might have wrote it down, but I don't. It's basically a complexity. It's basically what is called complexity, and it's like a balloon. So if I fill a balloon up with a little bit of air, it's flexible, it's no problem. But I keep filling it up. Eventually, it's going to come to this point to where it's either really big or it's going to pop. And what now I'm going to go back to parenthood. As a parent, my job is to expand or be a part of the expansion process
The challenge
of my children, letting them expand where they don't break, but just expand at a natural level and getting them to the point to where they can tolerate more and more flexibility. One of the things that we have to deal with in of course the church and church leadership, church management, pastoring is just being resilient, because you're constantly schedules are
not
constantly
just
changing.
COVID. This
No,
is a normal
no.
thing.
I mean, you literally, there has been times where I'm laughing and having a great time and get a phone call and everything's turned over on its ears and you're going a different direction at a different speed, and you just got to be tolerant from that. You've got to be resilient. So that balloon, blowing that balloon is, and let me throw this out there, and a lot of this is coming from memory. Some of it's, of course, I've got a few things, but that complexity, it is really the source of our tolerance for complexity in our life is really the root source of a lot of our mental challenges and our coping. Because, and I'll give an example. Let's just say if I blow up a balloon, and we can pile a lot of things on there. Let's just say, you lost a parent, your house burned down, your brother died when you was 7, you was abused. Well, that's a lot of complexity in a person's life. Well, let's just say that it's a little leak and it don't blow out. It's just a little leak. Well, we know that leak is there. And so mentally, and this is all subconscious, mentally, we know if I do something, it'll ease that leak. So we eat, we smoke, we drink, we do pills, we do drugs to
Self-medicate.
to where that leak isn't so hurtful, where that it didn't blow up. It's just something we medicate ourselves. But there are people that actually the balloon bursts, so to speak. And that's when we get into really some, and I'm not trying to, PTSD is one. There's many others, but that's where we kind of break down. And then it's hard for us to rebuild that balloon, but we can. It just takes time and it takes the right tools.
And a bit of strategy as well, understanding.
Right.
And that's where good apostolic counselors specifically come into play,
Yes.
where they can work through these issues and progressively help people.
Right.
It's amazing that we have those opportunities nowadays.
But without, this is the thing, if we don't allow risk in our lives, slowly we'll become hardened, where anything that expands us breaks us.
Yeah.
We got to be willing to go through some things. That is something that I guess I could be thankful for, all the craziness that happened in our lives, when you was a baby.
Right.
It really made us, my wife and I, more tolerant. We are more willing to deal with problems. But if you're going to grow, you've got to be willing to go through those risks.
Well, let's talk about two things. First, say I have a 3.5-year-old daughter.
Yeah.
If I want her to be very resilient as an adult,
Mm-hmm.
what are some stages, some things I can do now that can help her to progressively become more resilient, her capacity to lead, capacity to accept risk, understand risk? And we're not talking about just throwing risk to the wind and being reckless, but I'm saying understanding risk enough to where you can be successful. And then also, once we're done with that, I want to talk about, say, someone who's experienced these times where maybe they felt overloaded and they need to expand themselves in a progressive way.
Without blowing up.
Right, right. And something they can actionably do now. So let's start with
So
child.
let's look at a child. First of all, we've got to realize that there is developmental stages, and so she is within. And of course, it's a flexible thing. It's not like, okay, this is the box you're in, but she is in a developmental stage where she is developing her core character, her core character. So right now, at 3.5 years old, all the way up to probably 6 or 7, exposing them to different people, different cultures, different climates, different everything, just differences. Let them see that this is not the only way we live. And unfortunately, I'm from an area where it's like, this is actually funny. I'm from an area that they're like, buddy, if you don't think like me, you're wrong.
Sure.
And if you don't look like me, you're wrong. And that's what happened. They were sheltered, if you will. I think that's a good word.
Yeah.
Sheltered and protected in their little bubble. They was like the boy in the bubble, back in the 70s or whatever it was. We don't let anything in because that's danger. So as a 3.5-year-old, that's what you do. You expose them and you take them places and do things. Now that's, of course, travel is not required, but obviously there's things, a dog, man with a beard, Hispanic people, black people, white people, Oriental or Asian people, different environments. Not you don't want to. Of course, you never want to take a child into a bad environment, but different types of scenes. Take them to a carnival. Take them to, something that there's lots of lights, and because that is that developmental stage they're in. Get a little older, you've got to expand them a little farther, and that's with knowledge and travel. Travel becomes very important. Letting them see that there's obviously more places than where we're living. But you get to a point, and of course there's multiple stages. You can go with 3, you can go to 5, and then some people think there's like 7 or 8 stages, but I keep it simple because I'm simple. But you get to a point though to where you kind of have a fixed mindset if you don't continue to learn. Right. And unfortunately, we have found that I didn't do the research. Ted did the research. But we found that fixed mindset is actually one of the harbingers of horrible mental diseases as you get older, because there's, for instance, and I'm putting things together. You can't quote me on all. Well, you can quote me because I'm on internet, but it's
that's the risk you take.
Yeah, that's a risk I take. It's like there is a lowering of certain vitamins or minerals in your body, and then a fixed mindset, put them together, and you've got, dementia or whatever it may be. And so there are diseases that are triggered by a fixed mindset. It's crazy. So what we need to do as adults, as we age, is to continue to learn, continue to challenge ourselves, play games. Those things are just, they're fundamental to continued health, mental health. But when we're talking about risk, that is a huge, somebody told me recently, and I appreciate them for telling me this too, by the way, take care of your teeth, as an older person. And I'm like, man, I am. I'm brushing them twice a day. I floss at least once every other day, I think. Oh God, I probably need to floss more. But come to find out, your teeth are actually, again, kind of a harbinger to other health issues if you don't take care of them. Your gum disease, all this. Well, to bring it back to our subject, our topic, managing risk. Brushing your teeth is not risky. It's a reward for later. You're not going to see it immediately. And in life, we have to realize, it's worth me doing this. It's just worth me. But that's certain disciplines. Yeah. And that's really that would be it. Certain disciplines, eating good, fasting every once in a while. That's just good. And that's not even spiritual. That's just good for you. But in the sense of great reward, it's going to take greater risk. You're not going to get great reward. I guess you could get great reward by brushing your teeth, but you're not going to get great reward by doing just certain small things. The great reward is when you take great risk.
Right. And I'm putting this together now, but it seems as if discipline and risk together is a recipe more for success than anything else.
Absolutely.
Whereas many people who are sloppy
Absolutely.
lack discipline, but they love risk.
And they get in trouble.
They
They're
get
in
in trouble.
danger. They're danger.
And you see that.
Yes.
You go through any county jail, you're going to find those people
Absolutely.
who lack discipline,
No discipline and
But-
high risk.
but they need the risk. And I think we all need risk. That's the challenge of life. And I
Yeah.
think every young man, especially young men, need the discipline to manage the risk
That's right.
because they have a natural tendency to go towards risk.
That's right.
But if we could allow the discipline to be implanted into their mind, whatever it is, that can be managed.
And that is one of those developmental stages. You've got to teach that. And what I'm going to call it that first and second stage. Some things bleed over, but that first and second stage, you have to teach them to be on time. You have to teach them to, brush their teeth or clean their room. Those are there. I mean, I know they don't like them, but what we're doing is we're building discipline in their life, giving them building blocks for the future. Because if they can do those things, they can move on to greater disciplines later. For some reason, and I'm going to try to bring this all around. I don't know if I will. You see the way I'm dressed, and this is pretty typical of me. I got about 5 or 6 or 7 of these shirts.
You don't go around in a black suit with a white shirt and a black tie.
No, I don't. I'm not colorblind.
Have your Bible.
But I dress like this because I don't have. First of all, this is a clean cut. It looks good, and I didn't iron it or whatever. My wife takes care of all that. Thank God for her. But I want to handle more risk. I don't want to have to deal with, what are people thinking about me? What are people thinking about me? I want to move on to greater things. And if I get bogged down in those little things that don't matter, so what we've got to do is our children, they have got to know some things matter and some don't. And discipline is important. And there is a certain, maybe an intersection there of too much discipline and not enough risk, or too much risk and not enough discipline.
Wow.
And what we've got to do is show them that. Let me give an example. I have friends of mine, no names. One friend of mine is deathly afraid of lightning. I mean, lightning comes and they are running.
Was it a 1 in a million chance or something like that?
Something, I don't know what it is. It's
Sure.
way up there. But they're so afraid that when the rain comes, they can't do anything. That's not healthy. So you've got to discipline your mind. I've got a big scar on my head, and I've got ate up by a dog. But I know people that, I'm afraid of dogs. What happened? Somewhere in time, usually when they're younger, they weren't exposed to dogs.
Right.
And then they didn't realize that, you got good dogs, bad dogs. You've got to measure, is that a good dog or a bad dog? You've got to judge that. You've got to use that mental exercise that you were taught as a child to bring that intersection together of discipline and risk.
Right.
Kind of crazy. But
It
that's
is.
the way it is.
Yes. Discipline coupled with
Bringing it back to COVID.
Right.
This is a big thing. Bringing it back to COVID. We can't stop our lives out of fear.
Right.
That is not healthy. If you're listening to this tonight and you're so fearful that you can't, there's a long list of things you cannot do. I know there's health issues, and we know that there's, a relatively small percentage of society is mostly affected by COVID. If you're not in that small percentage, or if maybe you're borderline, and I'm going to just say that the number one is obesity, and number two is diabetes. Those two things are,
the actual issues.
they're the actual issues. They put you in a very high risk. But if you're not in one or both of those, you should have a tolerance within you that says, I'm willing to go to X, or I'm willing to do this. Because there's the chances, the percentages. It's a very small percentage chance that I will have a problem.
Right.
Wearing a mask lowers that. You know, those of you. Oh yes. Oh
I had to
yes.
model this. Excuse me. I had to model this today
Yeah, I like it.
because we're.
Did you
putting
just
them
stick your tongue out?
out. No.
No. Okay. It looks
Just
like it.
puffing.
Are you smiling?
My eyes squint.
Put it
when I
back on.
smile.
Look at. They need to see this. It says, what does it say here? What does it say? Victory Church. Yeah, there you go. No, don't tone that a little bit. There you go, right there, right there. Perfect. That's awesome. So we've got a bunch of those come in today. Ordered them. What was it, like 2 months ago, 3 months
A while
ago? And they just came in. So we're going to be giving those out, and I'm excited about that. But and you know what? That's another thing. Oh, can we order masks? Well, it might be over by the time we get our mask.
The risk.
Whatever. You know,
Like
you just
business
got to.
cards. Yeah, I don't know,
Exactly.
we may change service times. But
Exactly.
Let's just not do anything.
Right, exactly. So, and I've been a risk taker most of my life, and I would say managed risk for the most part. I've started a few businesses. I got married, of course. I rode in the car with my wife here today. You know, I've been a risk taker, and being funny there, but I've really been a risk taker. Coming to College Station, plant the church, it was huge. It was massive. Having children, massive. And I've said this so many times. This is actually funny. Let me say what I was going to say. I've said this so many times. There's never, and this is just a symbolic of a lot of things in life. There's never a perfect time to have a baby.
Right.
There's never a perfect time. There's better times and there's worse times. There's never really a perfect time. And I have seen so many young couples here at the church date and struggle and flip-flop and work and hard. Struggling to date one another, go to school, and work all at the same time. And I don't know how many times it's happened, but I'm like, why don't you just get married? Why don't you just get married? You help one another. You solve a lot of the problems. So
You're not trying to impress them anymore.
right. And what's crazy is, you get to the point to where you take away a lot of you avoid a lot of those secondary risks just by going to that. Let's just get married. Secondary risk is you're spending money that you wouldn't normally spend because you're dating and you're trying to impress them and all that kind of stuff. You're spending time where you could be together. You know, that's just an example. But I think the intersection of risk and reward has to be understood, and that discipline has to be a part of that ingredient, that you use them to move forward. Because, and we were talking about this the other day, the highway in front of the church here is 70. If we wanted no risk, there would maybe get on your, walking, but wait, you got risk there. So the levels of risk vary greatly.
Right.
Just in transportation, we walked for thousands of years, and then we got a horse, and we went 20 miles an hour. I guess we ran somewhere in there.
I think horses might be more dangerous than cars. But
I don't know. They were this week because that car wreck I was talking about earlier, that was a horse trailer. There's pulling a horse trailer. Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. So
Well, I think one issue we run into with risk, especially now with news media hyping certain things up and claiming risks, while that's not true, depending on where you get your information from, that's how you measure how risky certain things
hazards
are.
and disasters.
If we went to, I remember when we went to West Texas, we went canoeing on that trip, and went into Lake Amistad. And Lake Amistad was the lake that the family or the man was decapitated on because it was on the border of Mexico.
Yep.
And I remember saying, we're going to go to the Devil's River.
Yeah.
And we're going to go canoeing for 3 days, and we're going to end up in Lake Amistad.
And people were like, oh.
Exactly. But there's no one there to get you. There's no one to see.
Yeah, what are you going to do? What are you going to do if? What if?
Right.
Isn't that the
The
language?
what if? The language of the poor.
Yeah.
I forget who says that. But
Yeah, I wish I remembered
what
it too.
if
What
is
if?
the language of the poor.
But what if this happened?
Right.
You can't talk like that, or you'll always be poor. You've got to say, I've got to take this chance. This is
And this applies to everything in life, whether it be a canoeing trip, starting a business. You measure the risk. You have to.
Yes.
But you cannot live in that.
Some people look at it as risk. Other people look at it as opportunity.
Yeah.
That's just the way it is. When we went to Devil's River, it was 10 years ago or so, wasn't it? Something like that.
2012.
Yeah, 8 years ago. But I looked at it as like, man, let's go. And we left on a Sunday night. I think it was after church. Drove all night. I mean, and
It
everybody
might have been a Wednesday night. But I
might have
can't
been Wednesday
remember.
night. I don't remember either. It's been too long ago. I'd go back and look at
It was
pictures.
a 3-day trip.
Yeah, it was great. But
We
that's
slept
just
in the car in the Walmart parking lot, and
Right.
that morning we didn't even sleep. We maybe 30 minutes.
right.
We,
No, yeah.
But-
You know, another ingredient: ethics, morals. You got to apply. Yeah, because there are people that, and then I hate to get too spiritual here, but there are people, for instance, let's just put yourself in a workplace and you've got a wife and whatever children at home, and yet across the hall is some young lady that appeals to you, and you're playing that risk and reward game. Primary ingredient to this has to be ethics and morality. The Bible, the Word of God. There's some things just not worth the risk. You tear down your family, you tear down your children, you devastate the home because you want something that's risky. That's no good.
So we have discipline.
Yeah.
We have risk. What were we talking about? We have ethics.
Mhm.
And then I think a fourth one would also be the faith factor.
Yeah.
And this is in another direction than that. Just
Yeah.
walking by faith. And I know this is a time when people are saying, "Oh, Pastor, but you don't talk to me about faith right now. I'm trying to live in fear. I'm trying."
Yeah, right.
Uh,
That's the truth too. That is the truth. Some people are like, "Oh,
Don't shake me up right now.
Right.
I'm in a really safe place.
I feel good in my fear." It's like, wait a second, you're that's not the way you're supposed to live.
Right.
There is a tolerance level, and I think we all have to recognize our tolerance level. I think it's healthy, but we need to push our tolerance. There are people, like I said, what is a opportunity for one is a great risk for another. That's because of many ingredients that brought us to that place. How we was raised, where we were raised, what we did, all that kind of stuff. But we've got to recognize that we have a certain amount of tolerance for risk, but everybody has some tolerance for risk.
Right.
You can't live in a bubble. You cannot, I'll repeat it, you cannot live in a bubble.
Yes.
It doesn't make sense. You're killing,
Well, you hurt those around
opportunity.
you as well.
yes.
If you have kids and
Yeah.
you're trying to live in a bubble, it puts them off. I'll say that.
Another one, the past. One win, one victory of the past is not enough.
Right.
One risk of the past. Well, back in the day, you've got to constantly, and I'm not saying, of course, the older you get, the less willing to take risk you are, because it does hurt. You fall, jumping off a bridge at 19 is a little different from jumping off a bridge at 91.
Right.
So there's these boundaries, but
It's like as a kid when you walk up to play basketball and the first shot you make is a 3-pointer.
yeah,
You don't even want to take another.
don't want to
because
take another one.
I've done good enough. I can walk away now and be satisfied.
That's right.
There's a lot of people in the world that have done that 3-pointer in life.
And all they do is talk about the past.
And they go back to that thing. They say,
When I was in high school, I did this.
half court shot, hook
Yeah,
shot.
right. I won the game.
Back them out.
I want to be, and this is just a personal thing. I want to be, well, actually, I'm a doer. I do stuff. In fact, I think on my Twitter handle thing, whatever, I just do stuff. And I'm doing stuff so often and so much. And that sounds ridiculous that I'm saying that.
I'll pat you on the back.
Yeah, that's stupid.
I'm kidding.
I just want to be active enough that I never go backwards,
Right.
that I'm always going forward. And I think that's the way it should be, physically, mentally, spiritually. And of course, physically, we got our limits. 20 years ago, I could do this. Now I can't.
And you're saying this
But
from a
there's things that
pastor's
can-
perspective.
Yes.
You've seen this play out in other people's lives.
Absolutely.
And that's where, as a hospital chaplain, I've been in the hospital
Same
numerous
thing.
times where I go into rooms where the person's 65, 70, 80 years old, and they have a bucket list, and they never touched any of them because they always thought that one day I'm going to be so risk adverse that I'm not going to risk losing my job. I'm not going to go out and take a 2-week vacation.
When I
in
grow
Panama.
up, I'm going to do this.
That's
It's like
literally
you're
what it
80 years
is.
old.
That's the bucket list.
Yeah.
My daughter says when I grow up, she thinks she's going to be younger.
Yeah.
She-
Yeah.
it's backwards, but so many people think the same way when they're older. They say, "Well, when I get older, I'm going to be younger.
Yeah.
Therefore, I'll be able
I'll
to
be able to do that.
all these things."
Right.
But instead, they make it to that age and they can't keep up.
Well, let me tell a story and then I'll go on. I met one of the saddest things I've ever had to deal with, I guess, is someone, I think they were in their 80s, and they told me, I have gone through my whole life, and this is what they said. It was a spiritual thing. Gone through my whole life without winning a soul of the Lord. And they were, for the most part, living for God all their life. 80 years, and they were 80 plus. I won't say exactly because I don't remember, but 80 plus. And, and they're looking at me like, okay, tell me what to do now. And I'm like, you kind of missed, maybe you didn't, maybe you get a nurse or a fellow person or whatever, caregiver or whatever, but there's certain windows of opportunity that you've got to take those risks at that time, because they're not going to get easier later. You're going to lose that. We have more friends. I forget exactly the year, but it's like 42 or 40, whatever it is. We have more friends in our life at 40 than we have all of our life, any other time in our life.
You should, at least.
You should, yeah. But they start dying, and then you disconnect, and you become more intimate with children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. And so you lose connectivity with all these people. There is a great opportunity for younger people and you don't want to miss that. On a spiritual level, you need to take advantage of your age. And I'm 52, so I don't necessarily feel that limit. I feel like I could go running right now, but probably not as far as I did when I was 20.
Right.
But mentally, I'm feeling as good. Maybe not as my memory's not as good. I don't know, but there's just opportunity you have from 20 to 40. You better seize the moment.
There's values in every
Carpe
portion of
diem.
life. And you have the wisdom to live off of when you're older.
Yeah.
And
I'm
so,
not going to jump off that bridge.
Exactly. So you learn those lessons.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you understand what real risk is.
Yeah.
And so often we are deceived by so many different things.
Yeah.
Even Satan. Just
Absolutely.
to convince you.
Absolutely.
And you'll never be able to gain whatever God has for you.
He makes us think that doing anything for God is the greatest risk.
Right.
There's nothing more riskier than, living for God or doing this for the Lord.
Is he God or is he not?
Right. Well, he's God of all or he's not at all. So, but yeah, there's a lot of ingredients to risk, but I think making it relative to our day, I would say that we're entering riskier times, not calmer times. Okay. So I think the future and risk, the word risk means the presence of danger. Okay. Dealing with danger, managing danger. We're going into more dangerous times than we've ever seen. And whatever you make that list, but there's things coming that we don't even see. They're on the horizon. We're starting to get a glimpse of them, but they're not here yet. And I use the scripture found in Jeremiah, and I don't remember where exactly, it says if you can't run, I'm paraphrasing, if you can't run with the footmen, how are you going to run with the horses? So as adults, if you're watching this, you've got to become more risk tolerant. Because there's more coming.
When that's in play, there's more coming. I was watching the 2020 Sweden, the Great Reset. I forget his name. The guy that was basically putting this on. Financial Reset.
Davos
in
and
Switzerland.
Klaus
Yes.
Schwartz.
He was talking about. He said, "Do not expect in 2021 for us to go back to what the good old days."
Right.
He was saying that,
and this is a world influencer.
Right. Exactly. And so he's wanting one world government, one world
currency, religion, everything. Yeah.
And he himself is saying we're not going back to the way it used to be.
What's crazy is he has the ear of many, many people that think just like him. And I'm not talking about people like us, nobody's.
Right.
I'm talking about world leaders.
Most wealthy in the world. You look at their list, you go to their website, they have a list of all the donors because it's put on by the donors.
That's right.
And there's a lot of big names.
Just to get in the door, $60,000.
Right.
Just to get in the door.
It's 60 to 600,000, I think, is what the range.
Yeah.
Crazy.
And it's going up every year.
Right.
But Davos is huge. It's coming up. That's coming up next month, I believe it is. And those risks are coming. I'll put it that. I don't want to get into the financial and reset and all that, but greater dangers are coming. And what we have to do as mature saints of God, men and women, however our age is, say, you know what? I've got more reward for living for God or for doing the things of God, or, just going to church is right. Man, the government has made going to church the most
base.
fearful, the thing that we should all be, no big deal. Oh, it's horrible. It's risky, but they'll let us all get in jets.
Right.
I mean, we're going to go into enclosed jets, sit right next to each other for hours.
Circulate in the air all the way around.
Yeah, what are they? And they're going to, that to me, just when I began to think about that a few months ago, I just
Or
made
go
me
to
angry.
restaurants. That's another crazy thing.
Yeah, you sit down in a restaurant.
Well, I don't expose myself to people, but at the same time, I'll go sit at a restaurant. And apparently, there's a magical shield around me when I take my mask off to eat.
Right. Yeah, it's
I don't know how it works, but it is amazing how they allow us to do these things.
If you've got those great, horrible, and sadly, it breaks my heart to say this, 42% of our nation is obese.
Right.
But if you're that 42% plus you've got diabetes, take precautions.
But get in shape too. Try it.
Change. Make changes. Change your life. But then, would you rather, I don't know. I want to say things, I don't want to be rude. What would there's got to be a place where you say, you know what? I'm going to mitigate the dangers by, okay, I'm obese, I've got diabetes. I can't do everything. But what can I do?
Right.
And I can wear a mask. I can social distance. I can even wear gloves. I saw somebody recently that had gloves on, long gloves, mask, and a face shield recently. And I didn't question their sanity. Their risk tolerance is that level, and that's fine. You've got to accept that there's risk and move on.
The only
Mitigate
person
the
you can
dangers.
control is you.
That's it. You're not, and that's the problem.
Right.
Woo-hoo. Different topic.
And we've got 5 minutes left, so
We
can't get into that.
Yeah, you should conform to my ideology.
Right.
That's horrible. We really can't get into this, but that is a horrible way to live because you're always let down because nobody wants to conform to that.
Right.
You control freak and all that kind of stuff. I call it control freak, but yeah,
Misplaced expectations, and
yeah,
you're always looking for everyone else.
you don't like me because of that.
Disappointed.
Yeah, I think there is a certain level of, we've got to recognize that there's a certain level of risk that everybody has to take. In fact, I would say this is crazy, and this is kind of one of those mind benders. The greatest risk is taking no risk.
Right. It is.
You won't grow. You don't move. You die. And why die like this? I feel like that kind of reminds me of the lepers outside the gate. Why sit here till we die?
Right.
Why are we sitting here? We're going to die one way or the other. Let's do something. And that's been my motivation in life. And I hurt myself sometimes. Y'all. I mean, come on. I tell people this. This is actually kind of funny. If you see me laughing and joking and smiling, it's because I have forgot a lot of bad things.
Right.
They're still there. I just forgot about them. That's just life.
I would say all of us, if you can get past that,
You can have a great time. Live
Right.
for God. Have a great time.
and I know people get offended. Don't tell me to just get over it, but we've got to learn to deal.
That's
cope.
that's that bubble, that balloon. You've got to be willing to
And prior to
expand yourself.
2020, we've all had a capacity. We've all had this, however big it was.
Well, that's true.
And then now 2020 hits,
No, COVID.
and everyone just added 20 psi.
Yep, that's right.
Whatever that was, you just expanded dramatically, very quickly.
Yep.
Now what?
I will
Do
say
you
this,
expect to
and
go
this is
back
important.
and not have the effects of that.
This is very important, and I think this is maybe even ministering to some people tonight. Do not cope wrong now.
Right.
Do not cope.
It's too early in the game.
If you
If you're noticing bad tendencies,
Yeah.
now's the time to nipple.
fix it, and get it taken care of, because there's ways that if your eye offends you, pluck it out of your hand. course, that's not the way we want to fix all of our problems. We have to walk around, everybody one arm or maybe no arms, I don't know, and no eyes. We'd all be blind. But the principle of it is fix those things. Fix them today, and don't cope with. And then I'm just going to name a few things. Don't cope with alcohol or pills or food or shopping. There's a lot. Telling you, and I might be wrong. I might be wrong. If President Trump gets reelected, it's going to get worse. And if things continue with Davos and all the things that are going on, it will be very bad. And our economy might not even allow you to go shopping 2 years from now, 3 years from now. What are you going to do then? What are you going to do then? How are you going to fix yourself? Best thing is discipline yourself, fix those things.
This is
today.
crazy talk.
Yes, it is.
I need to
Whack
go
out.
watch Netflix again and go
Right.
just a different world.
Sit down and chill out. Or what do they call it? Not chill out. Well, I guess it is chill out.
Anyways, yeah. So anyways, thank you for watching. This has been Pastor Talks. We're coming right down to the hour. I understand if you had some buffering issues, why don't you check us out on YouTube and you can watch the whole show. And
Subscribe.
Exactly, subscribe, because we have a very large percentage of our viewers that are not subscribed. So we want you to
What?
subscribe,
What?
like, and for those members of Victory Church, you can get you a risk management tool right here, a mask. So
Oh my
thank you for
goodness.
watching. We love you. God bless you. Have a great night.